Late-night TV is an American cultural touchstone. There's something magical about the format that's been able to captivate audiences for decades. People like David Letterman, Johnny Carson, and Jay Leno became superstars as they gave us an up-close and personal look at the lives and personalities of the celebrities and public figures they invited on their shows. Over the years, there have been countless controversial, shocking, and downright wild moments that have gone down on these kinds of late-night programs. Join Facts First as we take a look at some of the most crazy moments in late-night TV history. Be warned, however, this one is for adult eyes only. Drew Barrymore flashed David Letterman. In the 90s, actress Drew Barrymore was known for being a bit of a rebel, and drugs and alcohol played a major role in her story. It all began before she was 10 years old, and these themes continued to define her into her teenage years, as she was often caught up in the tabloid headlines for her wild antics. Barrymore's friend and mentor Steven Spielberg tried his best to get her to mellow out after she posed nude for Playboy, but Drew wasn't eager to immediately take his advice. And then came the shocking moment when Barrymore flashed David Letterman on live TV when she was a guest on his program. While that incident definitely gave the public something to talk about, reflecting back on that moment, Barrymore sees it more as something akin to a swan song. But to gain a fuller understanding of what exactly went down on that night, we'll give you a bit of backstory. In 1995, Drew and a friend decided they wanted to visit the Blue Angel nightclub in New York City. The Blue Angel is known for its live entertainment, ranging from stand-up amateur comic routines to flashy burlesque shows. Barrymore's friend went on stage that evening to do a comic act using an alias. Drew likewise chose to create an alter ego for herself as well. Taking the name Lolita, she spontaneously decided to join her friend on stage. As her friend continued to deliver his material, Barrymore felt compelled to dance around the stage like a 1960s go-go dancer while slowly taking off her clothing one piece at a time. After the set was over, Barrymore and her friend left the stage quickly, and that was that. Or at least that's what Drew thought. Unbeknownst to her, however, David Letterman and his team had caught wind of the Lolita incident, and when Barrymore appeared as a guest on his talk show not long after, one of Letterman's producers asked her during her pre-interview if she was willing to discuss her Lolita persona and her friend's Blue Angel performance on the show. Drew agreed and showed up to Letterman in character as Lolita. It was Letterman's birthday show, and the free-spirited Barrymore, who had just done Playboy, wanted to let go of everything that could be viewed as appropriate. Drew and Dave discussed the Blue Angel performance lightheartedly, and she later claimed she felt very safe on his set. Suddenly, like a light bulb turning on, Barrymore was struck with the idea to start reenacting the impromptu performance she had given. Before she could even think things through, she was suddenly standing up on the talk show host's desk. And in a moment she would refer to as uncalculated silliness, Barrymore lifted up her top to flash David in such a way that no one else could see. As soon as it happened, she felt a twinge of worry about what the audience thought. Fortunately for her, Dave merely threw his head back and laughed it off. Barrymore looked back on this incident and called it a moment of freedom, as well as an end of an era. She went on to clean up her public image and sought out projects that didn't involve nudity or sex scenes. The next film she starred in was Ever After, a movie that saw Barrymore give audiences a fresh, new, empowering look at the character Cinderella. Marlon Brando kissed Larry King. Late-night legend Larry King passed away in 2021 at age 87. Throughout his prolific career as a TV personality, the veteran talk show host got the chance to interview countless stars. People like Frank Sinatra, Prince, Paul McCartney, and perhaps most memorably, Marlon Brando. Larry King visited the Godfather actor at his private residence in LA in 1994, a week after going out for lunch with him. Brando reportedly only ever agreed to do the interview with King in order to fulfill a stipulation in his contract with the Random House Publishing Company, which required him to do an interview to promote his latest book, Songs My Mother Taught Me. Marlon chose to do his interview on Larry King Live because it was his belief that King was, as he put it, forthright, sincere, direct, and unexploitative. The actor had just one request, and that was that he and King would have lunch together before the interview. During the discussion that ensued, which apparently took over an hour and a half, Brando was in an exceptionally playful mood. He spent most of the exchange with his bare feet propped up on an ottoman and interrupted King several times as he asked his questions. After pinching King's nose, Brando managed to convince King to sing a duet with him, and at the end of the number, he leaned in and planted a kiss on the host's lips. Years later, King told reporters the incident was something he couldn't stop thinking about. Crispin Glover's freaky deaky Letterman appearance. During a rather uncomfortable appearance on Letterman, Crispin Glover, whom you might know as George McFly from the Back to the Future trilogy, came dangerously close to kicking the late-night host in the head. Glover had agreed to come on the show to promote the film River's Edge, but to Letterman and the audience's surprise, he appeared wearing a wig and platform shoes. Throughout the interview, Glover acted erratically and rambled on neurotically about how he felt like the press had treated him unfairly. After asking Dave if he wanted to arm wrestle, Glover stood up, flexing his bicep while boasting about how strong he was. Then, suddenly, out of the blue, he threw a roundhouse kick in Letterman's direction, prompting Dave to stand up and abruptly end the interview. 3 weeks later, Glover returned to Letterman for a second interview, and although the actor still behaved somewhat strangely, there were no further kicking incidents. In that interview, Dave did ask Glover if he'd ever been put in a headlock and told him he was seconds away from being slapped, although Letterman claimed he was just teasing. 4 years later, after Glover's film Ruben and Ed premiered, it was speculated that Crispin had been in character as the film's titular character Reuben Farr during his peculiar appearance on Letterman. In the years since, Glover has refused to go into any further detail explaining his behavior on the show, and says he prefers there to be an air of mystery surrounding his performance. Andy Dick was booted off Kimmel for groping Ivanka Trump. In 2018, actor Andy Dick came under heavy fire and was slapped with a mountain of legal trouble after he reportedly groped a woman at a bus stop on the streets of LA. The controversial comic, then 52, was charged with misdemeanor sexual battery related to that incident. Years prior, in 2007, Dick groped Ivanka Trump while on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Recently resurfaced video of the incident shows Dick rubbing his hands on Trump's leg. In the footage, Ivanka looked shocked by Dick's behavior, but did her best to laugh it off while repeatedly slapping Dick's hands away and trying to get him to remove them from her body. Kimmel tried to step in and help her, telling Dick not to touch Ivanka any further. Kimmel then got up and told Andy that Donald Trump would kill both he and Andy if he continued to accost her. Dick was then dragged off stage by members of security and Kimmel. After the incident, Kimmel revealed that Dick had not been upset about being dragged off the set, and that he was unapologetic for his egregiously inappropriate behavior. Looking back on this shocking moment in late-night TV history, it seems almost impossible that such a thing could happen, especially given the fact that Ivanka is now daughter of a former U.S. president, and the post-Me Too world has become completely intolerant to such abuses of fame. Dick later pleaded guilty in October of 2019 to charges of grabbing an Uber driver by his genitals. In 2021, he was arrested for felony assault with a deadly weapon after assaulting his lover with a metal chair. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already, and stick around for more of the sensational moments from late-night television history. Cher called Letterman an asshole on national television. Leading up to her appearance on his show, David Letterman had been trying to get Cher as a guest for 4 years. Eventually, he was able to convince her to come on after paying a $28,000 hotel bill. The reason why she repeatedly turned him down, however, was that she thought Dave was an asshole. But not only did she believe it, but she ended up saying it to his face when she made her debut appearance on The Late Show on May 22, 1986. The interview got off to a rocky start. Her first conversation was to Paul Schaefer and not Dave, but after successfully being able to grab his guest's attention, Letterman tried to make small talk by telling Cher how much he appreciated her perfume. After revealing she actually had combined a variety of scents and picking up on how boring this conversation had to be for the audience, Cher asked Letterman, with a smug grin on her face, if this was as good as their discussion was going to get. The interview continued on, albeit awkwardly, until Dave asked the singer why she had turned down appearing on the show so many times. Cher responded by saying she never thought she wanted to do the show with him. Letterman interrupted her by asking why she thought that, but before he could get his words out, Cher said it was that she thought he was an asshole. The audience reacted to Cher's sensational comment by first gasping before clapping and finally booing. After Letterman attempted to quell the audience by jokingly recapping the moment by saying Cher had just called him an awfully nice guy, Cher explained that while she was a fan of the show and had nothing against Letterman in particular, she had seen how in the past things would get frightening whenever Dave talked to guests he didn't like. Health guru Jerome Rodale died on the Dick Cavett show. On June 8, 1971, Rodale suffered a heart attack and died at age 72 while he was a guest on the late-night talk program The Dick Cavett Show. The show, which was filmed in the early evening, was expected to air later that night. Hauntingly, during his interview, which he had just completed before dying, Rodale had said he was in such good health, and he had fallen down a flight of stairs the day prior and had laughed all the way down. He further declared he planned on living to be 100, and he never felt better in his life. After the interview, Rodale remained on stage sitting on a couch next to the next guest, New York Post columnist Pete Hamill. Hamill was the one who first realized that Rodale had apparently lost consciousness. After leaning over to Cavett and saying it looked bad, Cavett asked, "Are we boring you, Mr. Rodale?" After realizing Rodale was experiencing a medical emergency, Cavett asked the audience if anyone was a doctor. An orthopedic surgeon and an intern rushed to the stage and attempted to revive Rodale. Sadly, he couldn't be revived, and he was pronounced dead upon arrival after being taken to nearby Roosevelt Hospital. The episode never was broadcast, and the footage of the incident has since been lost. Madonna's controversial statements on Letterman. Madonna appeared on The Late Show with David Letterman on March 31, 1994. The appearance was especially notable for her extremely offensive comments and behavior. Throughout the interview, Madonna used profanity profusely, uttering the F-word 14 times. This resulted in the episode being the most censored American talk show to air on a major network in history. Interestingly, it also garnered Letterman some of his highest ratings. Madonna's appearance in '94 was not her first one nor her last. Previously, in 1988, she'd been a guest of NBC's Late Night with David Letterman. This appearance, however, marked her first appearance on TV after the controversy that her book Sex and her album Erotica stirred up. During the interview, Madonna presented Letterman with a pair of her underwear and asked him to smell them. Letterman then asked her to kiss an audience member, which she refused. At one point, Madonna lit up a cigar and stated she wanted to break the rules and not conform to the restraints of network television. After continuing to use profanity and complaining about how Letterman had been obsessed with her sex life, the camera cut to an elderly couple from Wisconsin who looked visibly disturbed by Madonna's language. After a second commercial break, Madonna asked Dave if he ever had urinated in the shower, claiming it was a cure for athlete's foot. Later, towards the end of the interview, Madonna asked if Letterman had ever smoked Indo, a slang term for marijuana. After Dave responded by saying he didn't know what she was talking about, Madonna called him a liar. Madonna then refused to leave the stage as members of the audience yelled for her to get off. After taking another commercial break, the show wrapped off with a performance by musical guest The Counting Crows. Conan O'Brien's Bugatti Stunt. In 2010, former Tonight Show host Conan O'Brien unveiled on his show a character named the Bugatti Veyron Mouse, a multi-million-dollar Bugatti sports car done up with mouse ears and whiskers. During the unveiling, a master recording of Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones was played in the background. O'Brien, who was set to host his last show later that week, claimed that by featuring the vehicle accompanied by the classic tune, the bit would cost NBC a grand total of $1.5 million. O'Brien explained that until the network pulled him and the show off the air, he could do whatever he wanted while they'd be forced to pay for it. In reality, O'Brien's estimate of the bit's cost was likely off by about $1 million, as a pre-existing agreement between NBC and several music licensing companies would permit the show to play the Stones hit at zero cost for a live performance. If the episode were to be rerun, however, NBC would likely have to pay $25,000 to $50,000 to the song's rights holder. And while the car featured was indeed one of the most expensive in the world, the show didn't actually pay for it. Instead, the Peterson Automotive Museum in LA lent the show its 2006 Bugatti Veyron at no cost. While O'Brien framed the stunt as being his way of getting back at a boss who wronged him, in reality it was nothing more than a publicity stunt. O'Brien ended up being released from his contract with NBC on September 1, 2010. Jay Leno returned to helm the show after him from 2010 to 2014 before passing the torch on to the show's current host, Jimmy Fallon. Johnny Carson caused a toilet paper shortage in 1973. In the early 70s, the U.S. was starting to grow accustomed to supply shortages. Oil prices had jumped through the roof due to an embargo, and the stock market was in a state of disarray. During this period of economic unrest, a Republican congressman from heavily forested state Wisconsin named Harold V. Froelich began to receive complaints from his constituents that pulp paper was getting difficult to come by. Around the same time, Froelich read news reports on a tissue paper shortage in Japan. Believing that the reason for this shortage was American companies exporting pulp paper out of the country to avoid paying tolls on domestic goods, Froelich issued a press release on November 16, 1973, warning of an impending paper shortage. Very few press outlets paid attention to his warning, at which point Froelich found out that the Fed's National Buying Center hadn't managed to secure their typical order for 4-month supplies of toilet paper, which were intended for politicians and soldiers. Froelich then issued another press release in December, warning about the potential for a toilet paper shortage. This time around, the media took the bait and covered the story on TV and in the papers. Suddenly, consumers were stockpiling and hoarding TP out of fear that they could potentially not be able to purchase any of it in the days and months to come. On December 19th, Johnny Carson mentioned Froelich's warning in one of his monologues. Seeing as how he had an audience somewhere in the ballpark of 20 million viewers, Carson's mentioning of a potential toilet paper shortage triggered a nationwide toilet paper panic. Stores were unable to keep the stuff on the shelves, as customers filled their shopping carts with every last package of TP they could get their hands on. Stores had to start setting limits on the number of rolls each customer could buy. Some even doubled their prices, not necessarily to gouge customers, but instead to dissuade them from purchasing more than they needed. The more toilet paper people hoarded, the more customers were unable to find it on store shelves, thus convincing them further that there was actually a shortage. The toilet paper fiasco continued into 1974. Eventually, however, consumers realized that the great shortage Froelich had predicted wasn't actually taking place. Ultimately, Froelich was forced to retract his comments, although his third and final press release on the topic didn't nearly get as much attention as the previous two. Carson also felt compelled to clear up the issue after returning back to the air after his holiday break. He stated he didn't want to be remembered as the guy who created a false toilet paper shortage scare and informed his viewers there was, in fact, no shortage. Letterman foiled a $2 million blackmail plot. In 2009, a journalist and former producer for CBS News named Joe Halderman was accused of attempting to blackmail late-night talk show host David Letterman for an eye-watering $2 million. Letterman described the incident on his talk show on October 1st by explaining that someone had threatened to expose his alleged sexual affairs with female staff members by writing a screenplay and book. Halderman, the man behind this failed plot, was arrested after he attempted to cash a fake $2 million check given to him by one of Letterman's lawyers. Halderman, at the time of his arrest, was one of the producers for the CBS program 48 Hours. He ended up being indicted by a grand jury in Manhattan and pled guilty to attempted grand larceny on October 2, 2009. Halderman had found out about the alleged affair by reading the diary of one of Letterman's assistants, Stephanie Burkett, whom he had once lived with. In March of 2010, Halderman pleaded guilty to a charge of attempted grand larceny and was given a 6-month jail sentence and 5 years probation. After serving 4 months of his sentence, Halderman was released from prison on September 2, 2010. Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman's fight on Late Night. Even in the 80s, most people knew professional wrestling was staged. Even so, there was something particularly alarming about the feud between pro wrestler Jerry the King Lawler and comic Andy Kaufman. To this day, many people still believe their notorious fight on late-night television was the genuine article. In the ring, the two had a feud in which Kaufman ended up in a neck brace after being on the receiving end of Lawler's signature move, the piledriver. They met back up to reconcile their beef on Letterman, but things ended up being extremely tense between the two for the entire segment. At one point, Lawler stood up and slapped the comedian with every bit of force he could manage to unleash before the show took an abrupt commercial break. When the show came back on the air, Kaufman was absent, although he returned to the stage to make a fierce, obscenity-laden rant against the wrestling Letterman. The two stars had everyone thoroughly fooled, and they probably deserve some kind of award for that straight-faced, stone-cold performance. It was only after Kaufman's death that the public finally learned that the incident had been staged. Norman Mailer headbutted Gore Vidal on the Dick Cavett Show. Gore Vidal was a 20th century author known for his sharp tongue and extensive bibliography. The highly opinionated and short-tempered man, although undeniably a genius, had several enemies, including William F. Buckley and Truman Capote. One of his most infamous feuds, however, was with American novelist and journalist Norman Mailer. On December 15, 1971, during the filming of an episode of The Dick Cavett Show, Norman Mailer reportedly headbutted Vidal while the two were backstage. When Vidal was asked by our reporter why Mailer had allegedly assaulted him, Vidal smugly said that words had failed Mailer once again. During the roundtable discussion on the show, which included participation by Janet Flanner, Vidal and Mailer hurled insults at each other over what Vidal had written about Mailer. Mailer was primarily upset with how Vidal had referenced that Mailer had stabbed his wife with a penknife 2 years prior and how he compared him to Charles Manson. While footage of the incident unfortunately isn't available, since it took place backstage when the cameras weren't rolling, it remains to this day one of the most shocking things to ever take place on the set of a late-night talk show. Now it's time to hear from you. Which incident that we discussed do you find to be the most shocking or fascinating? And can you think of any other incidents on late-night TV that you think deserve a mention? Let us know in the comments section. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.